Namaste. I can respond back. Namaste. Thank you. Just want to make sure everyone's still awake, or at least we had a tea break. But many thanks to the organizers and the sponsors of this amazing conference. Every session, one after another, has been so enlightening, and it's really a show of the direction that India is going. You can probably surmise by my accent and possibly my approach that I'm American, but my heart beats Indian. So I'm really honored to be here, and especially to talk to you about yoga. Can we get my deck? Thank you. Should I point it? Yeah. There we go. Okay. So yoga, the ultimate Indian soft power. And I'm here to talk about how we can attain a balance between the sacred and the secular. India's cuisines, tourism, handicrafts, and even Bollywood have long colored the world's imagination of what India offers the senses. But it's India's civilizational contributions in the realm of the sacred, yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, religious pluralism, classical arts, and vegetarianism that have the power to feed the world's soul. And while the supply chain of the former has traveled around the world largely intact, the latter, the exportation of that which is sacred and very often Hindu, has often entailed deliberate delinking of the spirit of these ancient systems in order to make them more palatable, dare say more marketable. Yoga in the West has largely been delinked from its Hindu roots for this reason. And now as the Indian government promotes International Yoga Day, and many Hindu gurus and spiritual teachers continue to spread their teachings, they too are oftentimes replicating, possibly unintentionally, a similar delinking. The Hindu American Foundation, the preeminent advocacy organization serving the needs of Hindu Americans, of which I'm a co-founder and serve as the executive director, sought to tackle the multi-billion-dollar yoga industry's delinking of Hindu and yoga with our Take Back Yoga, Bringing to Light Yoga's Hindu Roots campaign, also known as TBY. The largely successful campaign landed on the front page of the New York Times and received wide coverage by major media including The Washington Post, CNN, Al Jazeera, The Guardian, Open Magazine, and scores of other mainstream media outlets, sparking international dialogue and awareness. In the decades since TBY's launch, HAF has arrived at nuanced approaches from many of the lessons learned that today the Indian government and others could possibly benefit from in their messaging around yoga. Tonight, I will share HAF's experiences in striving to balance the sacred and secular and explore ways in which we can collectively align the narratives around yoga to ensure that both the integrity of yoga is preserved and protected, and that the benefits of it, because it is a soft power after all, are widely shared. So first, I'll just cover what we have seen in America and what sparked our Take Back Yoga. So the image here is actually my handwriting on the magazine that we were reading that catapulted this, campaign. I was sitting in the waiting room of a math class for my kids and thumbing through, they had a yoga journal there on the counter, and I was thumbing through it. There was a Gayatri Mantra, which was the mantra of the month. There were stories on Christian yoga, Kabbalah yoga, Zen Buddhist yoga. But the one word that seemed to be missing was Hindu. And so you can see that Yoga Journal is kind of a leader in the yoga industry. It has 1.8 million readership per year, 99,000 e-readers, meaning tablet and phone readers, and 14 million page views. So in other words, it's an influencer. And so we came up with a position paper And the position paper's name was Yoga Beyond Asana, Hindu Thought in Practice, and launched Take Back Yoga in order to shed light on yoga's Hindu roots. A debate ensued on the pages of the Washington Post on faith section between co-founder Suhag Shukla, also my better half, and Deepak Chopra. Chopra misrepresenting TBY as a claim of ownership and saying that yoga was not Hindu. Over the years, we've finessed our messaging based on the lessons learned from the opposition and critique of our work, and more clearly restated our basic premise, which is threefold. Yoga is much more than asana. Yoga is rooted in Hindu concepts. And though yoga is rooted in Hinduism, Hinduism does not own yoga, nor does one have to be Hindu to practice yoga. Going back just a little bit, so before our position paper, we also wrote a letter to the editor. And we provocatively asked, is Hindu the new H word? And our suspicions were confirmed when we called and someone at the journal said, well, yeah, we do kind of avoid the word Hindu because, you know, it carries a lot of baggage. To which we were scratching our heads saying, well, most religious traditions, if we look at what oftentimes happens, do carry baggage, but that doesn't take away from the philosophies and practices that they promote and the ideals that they wish to promote. So there you can see some footage of the Take Back Yoga campaign as it was covered on CNN. So the Academy in the United States has also been involved in delinking yoga from its Hindu roots. Theories have ranged from the suggestion that Patanjali was likely Buddhist, which is not to say that there are not Buddhist, Sikh, and Jain forms of yoga based on their respective interpretations, to the most recent popular theory that postural yoga stems from Indian exposure to and copying of Scandinavian gymnastics. Even the Take Back Yoga campaign has become the topic of academic study. Some 65 academic articles cite to it, including the Harvard Business School, which covers it rather positively in a unit on the branding of yoga. Others are critical of the campaign's relinking of yoga to Hinduism with a range of hypotheses that oftentimes misrepresent the intent and arguments made by TBY or misinterpret them. Most scholars who are critical of TBY, incidentally, have never bothered calling us to really find out what our intentions and interpretations were. So what have we seen in some of the messaging that's coming from India? The International Day of Yoga is explained as a moment to celebrate India's contribution to world civilizations with the introduction of yoga as a physical, mental, and spiritual practice. Following the adoption and widespread celebrations of Yoga Day, however, controversy quickly ensued when a number of organizations and institutions from minority religions in India expressed concerns about celebrations imposing and making mandatory an essentially Hindu practice. In response, officials quickly offered backtracking statements with tweets such as, "Yoga should not be connected with any particular religion," or, "We are not forcing people to do yoga. There is no religion in it." Or, "Health is wealth and yoga is the key to that. It should not be linked with any religion." In fact, all of the government or official statements thus far have studiously avoided or even denied the term Hindu, including the official descriptors of yoga's origins. Several officials even appear to equate yoga with just asana and other physical aspects. If you look at the Common Protocol, which I think is a very welcome addition, especially when in the United States 200 hours can qualify a yoga teacher to teach classes, and that can oftentimes jeopardize the well-being of students when you don't have someone who is really steeped in a tradition. Protocols are good things. But you'll notice in the origins description of yoga, there's one word missing. And here, as you look at this description, indeed the history here is not disputable. Everything stated here is true. But the absence of a specific mention of Hindu contributions, while it may be understandable because of the optics of a quote-unquote Hindu party promoting a quote-unquote Hindu practice in a secular democracy, it's still deeply problematic and has consequences of not only being able to extract the fullest potential of yoga's soft power, but also to the global understanding of Hinduism, the international standing of Hindus, and the integrity of the yoga tradition itself. And lastly, even prior to the advent of the International Yoga Day, many Indian gurus and spiritual teachers have also fallen prey to the same avoidance. While the reasons vary and are also not untrue, such as insisting that yoga or Hindu is a foreign term, or stating that the ultimate aim of yoga is to transcend the man-made labels and identities that more often divide us, the consequences of not equating Hindu with Indian, Vedic, Sanatan Dharma, or yogic are still the same. So you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal, Hindu, Hindu, Hindu? So I just want to go over some of those consequences. Having been immersed in the Western yoga community for more than 2 decades, now we've seen firsthand how many yoga magazines and yoga products try to distance themselves from ever using the word Hindu, preferring to use yogic, Vedic, and Indic. We've even seen them try to feebly claim that the various traditions of yoga are beyond time and space, predate Hinduism, or don't belong to any specific tradition. While this may seem of little consequence to Indians, most of whom will no doubt identify all of the traditions, darshana, the sacred texts mentioned in the Common Yoga Protocol or in Western yoga magazines as being part of Hinduism, readers from the rest of the globe don't understand or may not realize that Vedic and Upanishadic heritage refers to the heart of Hindu Dharma. They may not understand that the theistic traditions of Shaiva, Vaishnava, and Tantric traditions refer to the different strands of Hindu society, all of which are very much thriving today. So then, what are Hindus and Hinduism left with? We're left with a tired old colonial narrative of snake charmers and idol worshippers, caste and cow caricatures, and primitive and poor people. It is against this background, then, that the omission of the word Hindu by both the West and many Indians not only undermines the tradition, but also years of efforts by Hindu organizations, scholars, and thought leaders who have worked hard to explain yoga as far more than just a physical practice, and that it's rooted in Hindu concepts such as the eternal blissful nature of the soul, of dharma, of karma, of samsara, and moksha as the ultimate aim of life, and the Hindu articulations on consciousness. It's also a missed opportunity to better educate the global public about the greatest strength of Hinduism, and yet another example of Indic soft power, and that is religious pluralism, resulting from the religious freedom accorded to every individual to seek truth and tread our own path to reach our fullest potential, and the respect that must be accorded to others for the right to do so. This type of messaging would only further emphasize the fact that you can be of any background and still practice and benefit from yoga. Indeed, Hindu is a foreign term and not one the ancient rishis used to define or label themselves. But in modern times, it is the word that is generally associated with those of us who happen to be born into the legacy of the ancient rishis and have been inspired to live our lives according to their teachings of ahimsa, brahmacharya, bhakti, satsang, and seva, ekam sat vipraha bahuda vadanti, and vasudeva kutumbakam. Many have also argued that Hinduism, and by extension, its practices including yoga, is not a religion, but a spiritual science or a way of life. While there is truth in these descriptions as well, the argument falls short when the general understanding of religion in the framework of civil and human rights law is that a religion is a collection of sincerely held beliefs, worldviews, and cultural systems related to existential questions such as the relationship with material existence and the supernatural or the purpose of life. In this context, then, Hinduism absolutely is a religion, although unique among the world's religions, as it has no identifiable beginning in history, no single founder or prophet, no central religious establishment or sole authoritative scripture, and generally does not proselytize or seek conversion. It is also crucial to understand that there are adherents of other world religions that come together at various influential international platforms to define religious freedom or to defend religious minorities. So we must take ownership of the terms Hindu and Hinduism and define on our own terms who we are, what we do, and what we believe, lest we remain voiceless on the global scale. In delinking yoga from its religious foundation, yoga has also grown to be equated with just asana and has become over-commercialized. Most of what is billed as yoga around the world, specifically the US, is not the yoga described in the Yoga Sutra or any of yoga's seminal texts or traditions. Rather, it has morphed into a form of asana without devotion, understanding, or reflection, and therefore more akin to mere exercise. Case in point, you can register for naked yoga, beer yoga, cat, dog, or goat yoga. And so these are the types of yogas and an end result when you delink the sacred aspects from yoga. And it no longer looks like a quest for selfless service, loving devotion to God, the pursuit of truth and knowledge, or chitta vrit nirodha. The result is a decline of yoga as an inward spiritual quest. And lastly, who are we bending over backwards for? 65% of Americans believe that many religions can lead to salvation, so we don't have to be so self-conscious of the roots of yoga. 30% of Americans say that they're spiritual and not religious, and 24% of Americans believe in reincarnation. So many of the concepts that are rooted in the yoga systems are things that many Americans are actually attracted to. So what is the path forward? As a secular democracy, India, of course, has to be conscious of not mixing religion and state. And therefore, there's a need to balance the sacred and secular, or in other words, the soft power and benefits of yoga with the sensitivities of other communities who may feel celebrations are an imposition of Hindu practices. And it will need to remain truthful in its claims about yoga and its benefits, so as to not politicize that which is truly beneficial to all people and backgrounds. At the Hindu American Foundation, we faced a similar struggle because in the United States, the US Constitution requires that religion and state be separate. And so we struggled with the questions of where we know that yoga and all of the scientific research behind it shows that it's beneficial to children with ADHD, with hyperactivity. Are we going to deprive students if we equate yoga with a religious tradition, deny them of the possible benefits that yoga offers? And we came up with it's really just a balance of narrative. That you can say that something has roots, that yoga as a whole has roots in Hinduism, but that it's universally available to all, and that there are aspects that are just physical that can benefit students and be compliant with the requirements of separation of church and state as we see it in the United States. So similarly, the government of India, for those communities that might feel uncomfortable with a government that's promoting yoga as a whole, certainly could offer yoga asana, yoga therapy, pranayama, and some of the other physical aspects. But be careful to avoid some of the religious mantras and symbols that would keep yoga still whole as a practice for private entities to offer, but not have the government enter. Hinduism is a religion, and yoga is at its heart. through karma, bhakti, raj, and jnana. But as a non-proselytizing, inclusive, and syncretic religion, Hinduism never compels practitioners of yoga to profess allegiance to the tradition or convert. Thus, balancing the sacred and secular is possible by being honest about yoga as a spiritual science and a religious discipline to ensure that Hindus as a people can take pride in our civilizational contribution and have agency in defining who we are as a people and protecting our most vulnerable, and to see that the integrity of yoga is preserved and the benefits of it are widely shared. Thank you.